Watching live or listening back to this show from Teachers Talk Radio. You can catch up with all our shows by visiting our YouTube channel or by listening back at ttradio.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to enjoy more live education conversation from TTR. We hope you enjoy this show.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to tonight's show on Teachers Talk Radio. Tonight, we have an opportunity to rethink education and talk about how we might build a modern school for the world that, frankly, is changing every single minute. And it's a chance for us to introduce Ohana. Now, Ohana is this modern relational online school that's designed around how children learn best in a changing world. And for me, it's really exciting to have an opportunity because we often talk about how we want to develop schools, how we want to develop education, what the right solutions are. And in tonight's show, we do have that opportunity to explore why education needs to be more flexible, why it needs to be more human-centered, and how Ohana actually combines this idea of academic ambition along with things like safeguarding and emotional accessibility and technology in a very, very sort of carefully designed school environment. And what I want to stress is that our conversation tonight is about the future of school. It's not a conversation that's just about online learning or just about SEND or alternative provision or attendance. It's about everything that goes in to make sure that we're talking about the future of school. And ultimately, the bottom line for our show tonight is that children need ambition. They need better routes into learning. Now, we are joined tonight by Shari Kashyap, who is someone who is determined to talk about how to make schools better for the future, how to make them more fitting for the future. She is the founder and CEO of the O Education Group. And Shari, I'm delighted to be able to welcome you to the show. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. Good evening. Lovely to be here as well. Really excited about this conversation, and hopefully, we'll be able to talk collectively and think about the future of education.
Yeah, and we're also joined on the show by the wonderful Tom Rogers. So together as a team, we're going to really explore what Ohana Education does. So, Shari, would you mind just sort of setting up just a little bit of your background, sort of what led you to the O Education Group and to the creation of Ohana?
Yes. So my journey to Ohana, I suppose, is deeply personal because in many ways it starts with me as a child. I guess I was someone who found conforming to expectations quite difficult. And I experienced the world a little differently. Didn't always fit comfortably into ways people expect children to think, behave, or learn. So for me, education wasn't always straightforward, but I also sort of came to understand something incredibly important. By the time I reached university, I knew that education was not simply about qualifications. It was about freedom, about independence. It was about having choices and being able to shape my own future rather than have it shaped for me. So I went on to complete a master's degree in clinical psychology. And then when I moved to England, I also eventually trained and qualified as a head teacher. And I have worked mainly across education and children's services for most of my career, including on the front line, as a head of a residential special school, and then from there on as a senior executive at board levels in quite large independent organizations. And those experiences taught me a great deal. I saw extraordinary people doing extraordinary things and great work for and with children. But I also saw how, as organizations grow, systems, structures, competing priorities, that can sometimes make it hard to keep every decision centered around an individual child and that need that the child has. So I reached a point where I thought, I want the autonomy to do things differently and think about things differently, and then be accountable for those outcomes, that they create. So I stepped away from organizational leadership and began working independently as a consultant. And one of those consultancy projects that I did changed everything. I was supporting quite a large independent school in London, where I became aware of an increasing number of children at that school who didn't really seem to fit anywhere. They were struggling in that sort of mainstream but independent education, but they did not necessarily need the intensity of a traditional specialist school. So they were the kids who, were falling through the gap. Later on, as a parent described them, the in-betweeners, as it were. And that stayed with me because obviously as a child, I knew what it felt like to feel left behind. And I also knew what it feels like to be forgotten. And those are not experiences that a child should have to carry through education, because sometimes those experiences can actually shape your future and your entire life. So I asked myself, or began with asking a question around what might a school look like if it had been deliberately designed for those children specifically. In short, what would it look like if I was a child again and wanted to go to school? And that's where the whole idea, I suppose, or the concept came up of a school that was small, nurturing, relational, where, a child could feel safe. There was specialist understanding, there was consistency, but there were high expectations as well. And a school where belonging, well-being, and education were not treated as separate things. And that really became Odyssey. We embarked on a small, brave, some people call it crazy journey, and my partner and I sort of saved a small deposit for a house. So instead of buying a house, we actually used those personal savings and started small, and opened a very tiny school in London. It was, as I said, a brave, crazy thing to do. But very quickly, as we opened the school in London, we found that there was a growing need. And then slowly we took or made a bold decision to actually scale the London school a bit more. And then one school became two. We again sort of thought outside the box. And instead of going to traditional sort of sector lending models, we actually went and spoke to the bank. So that bank funding and belief in us really gave us the freedom to make choices that kept those outcomes for children at the heart of our schools and all the decision making that we did. And I suppose as Odyssey started and as our schools started to grow and we started to get children in, we found that there was a small cohort of children that even Odyssey couldn't meet need for. And that naturally led to the next question around, if a small specialist environment that's been created specifically for children with this need can't meet the need of these children, then what about those children who can't even access environments like Odyssey? And then when we looked at that more closely, we found that, many of those children were not children who had completely disengaged from the world. That's a wrong perception. These are children who were at home, often in their bedrooms, connecting through their screens. They were gaming, they were communicating, they were exploring, they were forming relationships, but they weren't disconnected. They were just connecting in different ways, a way that I suppose the education model of today has yet to recognize. And that, completely changed the question that we started asking. And instead of asking those children to return to environments where they felt overwhelmed or where they were excluded from, we then began to ask the question around, how can education meet them where they're at? That really was the birth of Ohana. And Ohana, just, in everything that we thought about Ohana, first the name, deeply meaningful for me at a personal level, because Ohana means family, and family means no one gets left behind or forgotten. And as a child, and perhaps as an adult, I've experienced both. So Ohana is simply not a name, not a brand, but actually it's a promise. It's a promise that a child will be seen, a promise that they will sort of remain part of something even when learning becomes difficult. And, that their place will not disappear because they need time or they need a different route into education. So Ohana really begins with the child's current reality. It meets the learner in places where they feel safe through technology that they already understand. So the screen, if you like, is not the destination. It's the bridge. It's a bridge to trusted relationships. It's a bridge back to belonging, back to education, back to confidence and future possibility. So a long answer to your question is, in a sense, in many ways, Ohana is the continuation, I suppose, of my own journey. So that's what it is, and that's what drives me.
So, what do you think about kind of the pace of traditional schools? I mean, has that really kept up with maybe how children actually learn?
Well, I think the world around us has changed significantly, especially since COVID. But the basic shape of schools hasn't changed. We still sort of tend to organize education around one building, one timetable, one pace, one accepted way of participating. And that may work for a lot of children. But as we're seeing through, all the data that's now coming out, it's actually not working for many. And what we're not seeing is a generation of children that don't want to learn. What we're seeing is children who cannot consistently access the conditions in which learning is being offered. And I think the challenge is not to lower those expectations, but perhaps to design better routes into learning. And that's why I suppose this conversation is so important, where we've got to really ask ourselves about what has changed most about children, families, and learning. And the obvious answer is the world around us has changed. The school model that exists today was something that kind of, you're both historians, so you know it a lot better than me. But in terms of, the school model today, that was designed in the industrial age. That was when things needed to be done at a mass, and education and skills needed to be created en masse. And that was the right thing to do at the time. And that was the generation that got us so much success and, gave us the future that we're living in. The reality today is that children are growing up in a very different world to what the generation of the industrial world was. We're growing up, they are growing up in a very different social, digital world. They communicate differently, they build identity, they access information, the way that they form relationships, all of that has changed. Even the way that families live, manage, and deal with even more complexity sometimes, that has changed simply because neurodiversity is more recognized now. There's emotional pressure in the impact of technology that we see on life, on everyday life, on everyday activities. So whilst all of that has happened around us, education is asking children to access education through structures that have sort of largely remained unchanged. But that doesn't mean that traditional schools don't work for children. It means that we need more than one credible model of school. And I suppose that is the important question that we need to ask ourselves and see whether the traditional school model, whether that's kept pace with how some children learn and what's required, I suppose.
No, there are plenty of headlines. If we move on to something like attendance, for example, something like 1.4 million students were sort of persistently absent in England in 24-25. I look at those kind of numbers and it sort of knocks me off my feet, really. What attendance is such a big issue. What is it that we kind of seem to be misunderstanding about attendance?
Well, I suppose I suppose we treat attendance as the full story or the whole story. Uh, you know, Attendance, of course, it matters, but physical presence does not actually automatically mean that there's meaningful learning taking place. A child can be in a classroom but still be shut down, or disconnected. Equally, a child can be online, through a learning through chat or a camera off participation, but being making very meaningful contributions and taking meaningful steps back into education. So I suppose we've got to ask ourselves, what is the important bit here for a child to be physically present and disengaged, or to really understand whether the child is accessing learning, connection, and progress. And, physical attendance always doesn't mean meaningful engagement. And I suppose we've really got to understand that.
Yeah, and I think things like COVID have no doubt exasperated this. But what is it that's causing this ever increasing level of disconnect from school?
Well, I suppose there's so many reasons. It could be anxiety, it could be, neurodivergence. Some children may have experienced bullying, or it may simply, but a big thing, be a case of sensory overload. There may be unmet learning needs. There could be trauma. There could be family circumstances, and I think when disengagement starts, it builds slowly, and a child starts to believe that school is not somewhere that they can succeed or belong. And once that happens, simply adding pressure to attend it's unlikely to work. So that relationship with learning has to be rebuilt, and I think it's about the system, and it's about people in the system becoming curious before becoming corrective. And, instead of saying, well, why isn't this child attending school, or what can we do for this child to comply? I think we should really be asking, what is this child experiencing, and what would make the model more attractive so that learning can become more accessible for children. I think that's really important.
I guess part of the way that I maybe see the debate is that there's a split between the blame and the shame. Schools can often be blamed for low attendance levels, and parents are often shamed for low attendance levels. And yet the problem seems so much more complex. So how can we kind of respond to the situation we're in with high levels of attendance without blame and shame?
Yeah, I think it's about families needing partnership and not judgment. Children need understanding, not labels. And schools need support because, teachers are doing an incredible job, under very, very difficult circumstances in the main. There's lots of constraints, there's lots of resourcing issues. And we kind of seem to have got into this balance of it's someone's fault, because something's not working, it has to be someone's fault. And blame basically tends to make people defensive. Parents end up blaming the school system or the teachers or the staff, and staff invariably may end up saying, well, families need to do more, and that blame kind of gets shifted back onto the family. So I suppose blame is not going to help us find a solution to this problem. I suppose what is going to help, as I said, is asking the right questions and looking at, what does meaningful engagement look like for a learner, and being able to try and recognize those small steps. Initially it just might mean a child being able to speak to one trusted adult or complete one small task after a difficult moment, and those steps really matter. And I guess when we've thought of Ohana and designing re-entry, we recognize re-entry as progress. And I suppose it's something that school models should really consider. A child coming in to a lesson being physically present is not the criteria. It's that element of actually what is that child saying to us, and recognizing the patterns of responses that should really help us guide our responses and engagement with the child. But as I said, it's not a simple solution, and I know that there are hundreds and hundreds of teachers who would want to spend a lot of time doing this. But because of the way that schools are constructed and the model exists, they don't have either the time, the resources, and they are under so much pressure themselves to it. With sometimes student numbers in class, sometimes expectations, sometimes the cycle of the school year and what's expected in the term in terms of curriculum and delivery and exams, and all of those. All of that scaffolding that sits around the school model that simply doesn't allow experienced professionals and people who do the job and can do them well. It doesn't give them that breathing space to actually step back, think, and then make meaningful change. So I guess that's why it's a question of, this is not about blame. This is not about, oh, teachers don't care. They just come in and they're doing a job. In fact, teachers care passionately. Most teachers come into the profession because they want to make a difference in the lives of children, and most families look for those solutions because by the time they've got to a place where their child isn't attending, they're exhausted. They're looking for that support. They feel lonely. They feel as if they failed, and there's got to be a balance of each side understanding the other. But our model currently doesn't allow for that space.
Shara, I find it so interesting what you've said so far. You've really outlined a lot of the sort of background behind this conversation, in terms of your philosophy and in terms of your background to it. Obviously, we're here. Part of the conversation here is to talk about this really this modern relational online school, as we describe it as Ohana, which is brand new. And what I'd like to do next, before we ask you a few questions about it, just want to welcome all our viewers and listeners. So we've got a lot of viewers tuning in, and we've had some comments already, which we'll try and refer back to later on from viewers. So keep those coming in. If you have any questions or comments, keep them coming, and we'll try and get through to some of them in the next bit of time that we have. But thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in. Always appreciated, and don't forget to like and subscribe, of course, too. So, Sharu, wanted to ask first about Ohana. So I want to ask, first of all, what it is and what it isn't.
Yeah, good question. So Ohana, as we've said a few times already in the conversation, is a modern relational online school that is powered by a gaming education platform. And I suppose what we've tried to do is combine, we've tried to meet the child where the child is at, so that's been the core principle of our design. It combines live teaching. There's obviously structured curriculum pathways. There's a strong focus on relationships around flexible participation. We've obviously, being a school and being an online school, the focus has to be safeguarding-led systems and a digital environment that is designed around belonging and motivation. It's academically serious, but emotionally accessible. So this is not children simply sitting at home watching lessons on a screen. It's actually a very carefully designed community. So that's what Ohana is. What Ohana isn't is, well, it's not a tutoring organization. It's not a homeschooling platform. It's not an AI school. And it's not a behavior intervention service, and nor is it a gimmicky, gamified product. It's also not necessarily only for children with special education needs. And whilst a lot of neurodivergent children and learners with school anxiety will benefit from Ohana, the model that we've designed is broader and it's not around a single diagnosis or need. It's a modern school for learners who benefit from greater flexibility, personalization, and relational support. And I think we've taken the opportunity, I guess, because this is not the first online school in the world. There are currently very good models of online education, but I suppose we've taken an opportunity to rethink online education as well. Because sometimes online education can be too transactional. A learner could receive content without that belonging, flexibility without structure, or technology without that relational element to it. But we wanted to create that full or that complete school experience, where the child has the experience of the full curriculum, the national curriculum. Safeguarding systems are really, really robust. There's a community feel to being and belonging. There's pastoral care, there's assessment, there's real qualifications, and there's future pathways. So it's really about, as I said, we started off with the question around how do we build a better model of school for a digital age, and we've come up with Ohana.
You've mentioned that phrase. I'm really interested in it, this sort of phrase again of the relational online school, and you've mentioned some elements of that. What does that mean in practice? What does that actually mean? What does it look like?
Well, simply put, relationships, they're not an optional extra. They're part of the way that we've designed the school. So teachers, for example, are not simply delivering content. They're consistent adults who know the children, understand the access needs of every child. They notice the progress that children are making, and support the children return after having some difficult sessions, or if they've had any difficulties around that journey of education. And we've ensured that as we build the platform, that platform makes those relationships more visible and sustainable. And it's not about replacing them. It's actually really about it's technology that helps humans really come together and make it more relational. And I suppose that's been the interesting bit of using technology in our development process.
So if a child joins Ohana, which is, to remind everybody, this relational online school, which we've now talked about as a concept, and it's brand new, etc. What is the experience then of that child when they first join Ohana?
So the first experience that we really want the child to have is where the child should feel calm, where they should feel welcomed, and they should feel and they should be really, it's a low pressure environment, and as a result of that, we've created, Ohana is sort of creating its own language. So we've created something called the Ohana realm. So that the realm is the school world, and within the realm there are different parts that the child navigates and has access to. On entry, the learner enters an area called the hearth, which is the starting point in the Ohana realm. And in the hearth, they meet their digital guide, and the digital guide is called Omi. And Omi helps the child to have a gentle sort of orientation rather than being dropped into a online sort of class directly, or into a timetable, or straight into assessment. So once the child has sort of gone into the hearts, met with Omi, found a few interesting tools like a backpack that they have access to, which really guides them through their education journey. Their first experience really is to get on that first learning quest, and they automatically get into a building or a virtual learning environment, which is called the Quest of Minds, which really is a story-led journey. And what Quest of Minds is an adventure. For a child, it's an adventure. But basically, what it really is, it's a baseline assessment journey of that child. So staff begin to understand, how the learner thinks, communicates, responds to challenge, uses support. And we don't ask children, or we don't start by asking children to prove what they can do. So Quest of Minds is not a test, to pass. It's not a diagnostic, and it doesn't give the child a rank or a label. This is a strengths first starting map for the child. It helps the adults understand what supports the learner, what motivates them, how they communicate, and what helps them take that first safe step into learning. So that's probably that first experience that the child has.
Brilliant. And you've sort of touched on this a little bit, but how do you decide the right pathway for each learner?
So we take time, I guess, to understand, as I said, what makes the child feel safe, how they communicate, how they respond to change, what motivates them, what overwhelms them. We obviously listen to the family voice. We try and understand what their aspirations are. We obviously do all things that all schools would do naturally. So we consider academic starting points. What is their previous attainment? What are the areas that they may have missed, if any? What are confidence levels like? How do they participate? What is that participation style? Do they need any support around regulation? What are their interests? What are their qualification goals? What are their future aspirations? And that pathway is not fixed permanently. As confidence develops and evidence changes, the pathway moves with the learner. So it's truly personalized learning with the flexibility of the child moving through a pathway as they progress.
Brilliant. I love how much thought you have put into that, in terms of what you were saying about not just dropping the child into a timetable and into sort of that side of things, and actually thinking about how they are going to respond to it, and thinking about what their experience actually is. So I really like that. I wanted to ask you next just a little bit about sort of academic rigor, maybe without sort of rigidity. So how do you make sure flexibility does not become lower expectations for the child?
I guess by separating the standard from the route. And basically, that means the ambitions remain high. The route into that ambition may be different. So a child may need a slower pace. They might need a scaffolded task. They might need a different response format, or they might need slightly longer for a qualification timeline. That's not lowering standards. It's actually improving access. And I guess that's what that's what our whole design element is. It's understanding what we can do to make access better for a child.
Brilliant. No, that makes sense. So from a curriculum perspective then, what pathways does Ohana actually offer?
So Ohana is obviously, it's built on British-rooted, internationally informed curriculum. So it offers the full national curriculum structure. There's inquiry-led learning and Cambridge-style progression where appropriate for children. So that means that children can follow a range of pathways. They could follow core academics. They come in, they've come to do GCSEs. Yes, they follow that core academic pathway. Some may need that supported academic pathway. Some might just need to reconnect with learning before they get into a serious qualification pathway. Some might want to do qualifications, but through creative portfolios. Some might want international qualifications, or be very clear around what their future destination is going to look like, and have pathways and qualifications designed around that. So that's why these are very flexible around the needs of every child, and not sort of we don't label children and on pathways, and they don't have to stick to one. If they suddenly realize that we wanted to do something that was more creative, but actually can that be combined with the GCSE sort of outcome as well? Absolutely. There are ways that children can cross between pathways as well.
It's just a really exciting journey that we're discussing, and it sort of does kind of bring me around to a few questions. But I do really want to reach out to everyone who's listening live to the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please do like, subscribe. Please do share what we're doing here. We're so excited to have you. And there are some great comments, and I'm gonna steal from one of them in a moment. But a question I think a few of us might ask in the profession is could an online school really create belonging?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if belonging is deliberately designed intentionally. I think it has to be intentionally designed. Belonging online, you're right, and your listeners are right. It doesn't happen automatically. It is built through familiar adults, through predictable routines, through small groups, through shared activities, through community rituals and meaningful participation. And in fact, for some children, online connection can feel much safer initially because it reduces that social or sensory pressure. It's actually possible to form deep belonging and relationships with teachers and peers. But obviously, there has to be consistency. And, there has to be, as I said, familiarity. There needs to be regular check-ins and adults who notice both progress and difficulty. So, yeah, absolutely is the answer, but it has to be designed intentionally.
So it's a question that I had sort of pinging around. It's about the notion of relationship. I always call myself a relationship practitioner, and one of our listeners, 7 King 8 Deb 79, it's just kind of written in and said, look, the degree of separation presented by being a virtual school surely has limits to a relational approach, and that really sort of connects with my idea. Like, how is it possible? How do we build relationships between teachers and students?
Yeah, and I suppose this is it's a good question, and it's a very natural question to ask because for so long we have always felt that you need a physical space to actually be in the same place, to be able to do the same things, to be able to build those relationships. But right at the start of this conversation, we discussed the world has changed. There are relationships being formed online. There are organizations, companies that are, across different continents, and teams that work relationally very close in making huge companies very, very successful. And teams form very, very close relationships. There are great bonds that happen online, and there have to be, I agree, there have to be opportunities for that physical interaction. But children who are locked away in their bedrooms aren't locked away in their bedrooms forever. They do have social interactions, and that concept that we have in our minds that schools have to be a physical geography for us to be able to build those meaning relationships we have to challenge that mindset, and we have to think about it in a different way because children socialize and can socialize through very structured, purposeful opportunities. Sometimes actually unstructured social spaces in physical schools can be quite overwhelming for students, and shared projects, guided conversations, creative tasks, group missions, they can provide a real safe route into connections. And relationships sometimes, it may not mean forming or making a very close friend. It can just be feeling safe enough to be present with others. So I guess there is a real need for us to challenge ourselves and think about what relationships look like in the world that we live in today.
Just to nip in there as well to say, you know, this idea of sort of, you know, there's a lot of people like Tim. I've never met Tim in real life. So, you know, the idea that you can't sort of, you know, have sort of bonds or relationship with people, or just acquaintance level, whatever it is, a professional relationship, a friendship, whatever the different levels are, you know, of it from an online thing. I mean, you know, there's tons of examples out there of people who've never met in real life or don't meet in real life for a long period of time and then meet in real life and they get, you know what I mean? So I think that is just the reality of, like you say, of life now, but also it has been proven that it can work. You know, if it's done in the right way, then it can work.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a fantastic Netflix documentary around, it's called The Remarkable Life of Eileen, and, definitely recommend watching that, you know, about a child and then a young adult whose parents actually didn't know anything about the fantastic online relationships that he had, and the world that he lived in, and the friendships that he made, and the bonds that he created, that when he sort of sadly passed away, there were over 500 people from that fellowship game that actually attended his funeral, and the parents discovered all about his strengths, his personality, and his connections after his passing. So I strongly recommend, that viewers watch that, because I was completely blown away when I saw that, and it's a real example of what impact and real connection can look like, even through just online settings.
Oh, Tim, we can't hear you. I don't know why.
We can't hear you.
I'm not sure why. I will come in with another question. I wanted to ask you just about what you said in terms of how we've touched on this a little bit already, but how do children build relationships with teachers and peers? So how do they actually build those relationships? Because we've said it's possible, which I, on a personal level, agree with. What I'm interested in is how it actually happened. I think you're back, Tim, but how it actually happened.
Well, I guess teachers, peers, mentors, they're all they're the human center of the model. You know, the technology is the technology, but the humans are actually the ones who are making everything relational. So the tech supports planning, communication, visibility, but the children, the learners, they need trusted adults. So the teachers, the mentors, they notice patterns and they build relationships. How do you build relationships? And that's a very human thing to do. They build that trust, they adapt the learning, they support the re-entry, they work with families, they understand the child, and they not only understand the child, but they actually keep the whole child visible. And for a lot of children, it's probably the first time that they're actually being seen. So there is that element, but then there is a little bit of element that our digital guide does as well in terms of that relational work. So it's interesting where we use a little bit of technology to help build that relationship or confidence in the child as well, where the child learns that they don't actually have to be in a room with a digital guide and expect to either behave in a certain way, respond, or do anything in particular. They've got the space to be themselves. And if they just want to sit in the hearth and spend some time by themselves, they have the ability to do that. So they know and they start to learn that they're in their safe space. And once a child is safe, they're able to reconnect with themselves. They're then able to connect with others. So the real focus is helping child or children sort of reconnect with themselves, giving them that agency, giving them that confidence, and all of that pulled together really then helps them to start making meaningful relationships.
Just before Tim comes back in, I think it's worth saying to people, if you want to find out more about what we're talking about, you can actually go to the website, which is weareohana.co.uk. You can watch a little clip on there about what this is all about as well. And yeah, head over there, guys, and have a look. This is what we're talking about right now. Sorry, Tim.
Hey, absolutely. I think I'm back. I am back.
You are.
But that's what's great about this kind of conversation. Yeah, ultimately, we're trying to rethink education and sort of think about alternative measures and what it could look like. Now, you've just touched on the importance of our young people who are part of the Ohana model. You're feeling safe and being part of that relationship model. And I guess that when people hear, you know, it's not just an online school, but when they hear about anything being online, one thing they're going to jump to is this notion of safeguarding. How would you respond to the notion of safeguarding?
Yeah, and absolutely, a completely legitimate question, and something that, you know, started with us for the beginning of Ohana design. You know, so online safeguarding has to be designed right from the beginning. It's not something you can add afterwards or as an afterthought. You know, so at Ohana, safeguarding includes, you know, clear DSL oversight. So the designated safeguarding role is very, very clear. You know, there's role-based access for staff. There's concerns that are logged. There's audit trails, very, very clearly time-stamped audit trails. There's proportionate alerting and escalation as per the sort of keeping children safe in education framework. There's obviously staff review, and you know, it's also very, very important within this safeguarding premise to have family partnerships as well. So for us, you know, the principle around that development of safeguarding was really, really simple. It was using technology, the best of technology, to give us maximum visibility around risk and around safeguarding matters. But safeguarding remains human-led. You know, technology flags, it creates patterns, it gives us all the wonderful data that we need, but decisions around risk and safeguarding and interpretation of those risks and context is all down to the adults and the humans, if you like, within the realm. You know, that's something that's been very clear within our principles.
Yeah, and stressing that point, human, then, is how do you make sure that the technology maybe supports children without actually replacing adults, replacing the humans?
I think that's the real focus that we've been deliberate with in the design of Ohana. You know, we've wanted to use technology, but we wanted to use it as children understand it, and also to use the huge advances in technology, AI, you know, to support staff, to help and make life easier for them. So staff have access to this wonderful portal within Ohana, within which we call the teacher realm. You know, where they can access, and with the click of a button, they can actually create lesson plans, and they can do all their planning. So all that time that's required to create, you know, different or differentiations of delivery can be aided by technology. So we've actually used technology to help humans make their delivery and processing of data and reviewing the curriculum and reviewing the offer. We've kind of focused technology around that, so that humans are then freed up from not having to do those important administrative tasks, but those tasks that can take forever, that you then don't have time for that relational work with children and families. And it's about freeing up that time within the Ohana setting for children to be, for teachers to be able to do exactly that with children and families.
Yeah. Yeah. The other interesting kind of concept that we we've talked about and mentioned, but maybe could do with drilling down a little bit more, is this idea and notion of gamification. And I'm guessing that we like in education we've probably been a bit used to sort of gimmicks, and I don't think that's what this is. So I'm just really interested, like, what do we mean by gamification when we're talking about it from an Ohana perspective?
Yeah. I'm so glad you've asked me that question, because I've been very keen to sort of explain the whole gamification concept, precisely because of what you've said. Sometimes it does and can turn into a bit of a gimmick, but we're not turning school into a game. We're really, really clear. As I said right in the beginning, it's really serious education. But what we are doing is we're borrowing the best principles from game design, so visible progress, safe challenge, feedback, immediate feedback to the child that the game can give, and that children can receive and do receive, the way that they can discover themselves, mastery skills, that they can go and repeat things again and again until they get to that right level, and that chance to try again. And good games really help children experience failure as a part of learning. And for far too long and far too often in education, failure becomes part of a child's identity. We've actually used those game design principles for recovery, for re-entry into education, and for motivation, where children have, who have struggled in schools, don't believe that progress is actually possible. So for us, that use of game design has been really exciting. But of course, like everything online, it has to be ethical and it has to be very, very carefully bounded. So as our learners move through quests and pathways and milestones, there's the recognition, if you like. It focuses on growth, on things like courage and knowledge and kindness and persistence and readiness. And they could be recognized for trying something difficult, so they could win a reward or a crystal for that, for helping others. But what we don't do is we don't have any public leaderboards. So we're not asking the question as to who's got there first and who's ahead. We're actually designed it to say, what has this learner grown into? Challenge exists through gaming, but recognition is private, it's relational, and it's growth-based. And we've been very careful around sort of designing it in that way.
What sort of impact do you think all of that then would have on on those who have been battered a little bit and lost confidence with the system?
Well, I'm hoping that it gives them the evidence that progress is possible. Success. And it gives them, just like in a game, it gives them the understanding that success doesn't have to mean that you've got to be perfect or that you've got to be the fastest. But what it can mean is that it can mean trying, it can mean returning, it can mean asking for help, it can mean contributing, or completing one more step than before. And that can be transformational for a child who has, almost come to believe that they're never going to be a success at school. So I think it can be extremely transformational for children's future trajectory and how they might sort of re-engage with learning and education.
Yeah, interesting. One thing that we often talk about and is often debated is the notion of AI. So, I'm again really interested in how that fits in with the Ohana model. So, how does Ohana use technology without necessarily becoming an AI school?
Yeah, and AI is changing how information is accessed. How work is completed, and it's also a reality around the world as it's transforming. We know that children and young people are going to need those skills and to be able to understand and work with and around AI. So schools, we just cannot afford to ignore that. But we should not confuse AI and innovation with removing people from education. So the real opportunity is, as I've said before, is to use AI to support teachers, to improve access, to reduce that unnecessary workload while protecting those professional judgments and relationships. So I think AI can support planning, it can do resource creation, adaptation, accessibility, but what it cannot and absolutely must not do is make decisions around safeguarding, provision, any outcomes that are specific for a child or for a child's future. So anything that's consequential, in a school setting, an online school setting, in our view, it absolutely must be human reviewed, human approved, human led, because the school is the product. It's not technology. It's actually the school, and Ohana is built around teaching, relationships, belonging, curriculum, progress, and technology and AI helps those elements work effectively and sort of brings it all together. So it's part of the infrastructure. It's not the identity of the school.
I just wanted to ask you, Shara, in terms of what do you in that context, what do you think then that education could look like in 10 years from now?
Well, I hope it becomes more flexible, it becomes more personalized, and it becomes more human without losing rigor. And I also hope that we move beyond the idea that there is only one legitimate model of school, and that is for children to go into a school building in one timetable, be present in the same setting at the same time, to be able to achieve meaningful education. I think it's really important that we can use technology to allow teachers to understand and support children better, and make it more relational, but not make education cold or make it more automated. So that's what I hope education can start to look like in 10 years' time.
So yeah, we're sort of coming towards the end of the show, and I've got a few questions in there. Once again, I want to thank the listeners to the live show, and for those who are sort of tuning in at the end and are really curious about what we're talking about, you'll certainly be able to visit Ohana's website. But what we're doing is we're trying to talk about how we could rethink the future of education. What education could look like in the future with a few sort of innovative changes. So Shara, who should be considering Ohana?
Well, I think families and children who are looking for a serious school experience, that is more flexible, that's more relational, that's more personalized. It's definitely for them. And that could include children with school anxiety, neurodivergent children, international families, children who are performers, athletes, or children who have become disengaged, or simply just need a calm environment to thrive in. So I think in the main, there's an element around that. But interestingly, and over our conversations as we've started to talk about Ohana with the world, it's been really interesting to hear of different strands that could also use Ohana. So this could include schools, as Ohana as a partner, and local authorities as well, looking for a credible online placement with a strong safeguarding structure of education with evidence of progress. So yeah, I think there's a wide audience that and a target that of people that can use Ohana very successfully.
I mean, the two people are going to walk into a room with you, and I guess the first one is a parent whose child is struggling at school, and then the second one is a teacher who maybe feels like the current system isn't allowing them to do their best work. What would you say to both of those groups, the parent with the child who's struggling and the teacher who maybe feels like the current system isn't allowing them to do their best work?
Well, to the parent, I would say you're not alone, and your child is not a failure. Struggling in one environment does not mean that the child cannot learn or thrive. Sometimes it's just the route that needs to change. And the aim is not to give up on ambition. It's to find the conditions in which ambition becomes possible again. So I suppose that's what I would say to the parent. To the teacher, I would say that teacher probably entered education to change lives and not to manage the impossible levels of pressure and bureaucracy. So teachers need models that allow them to know children, adapt learning, and to use their professional judgment. So for the teachers, I would say to them that if they came to work at Ohana, technology would free them to do more human work. It certainly wouldn't replace them.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Thank you. So, okay, one takeaway for our listeners who are listening live to the show, and then for those who are going to catch up on the podcast, what's one thing you would like our listeners to remember from this conversation?
That children don't need to become someone else to access education. That schools should not simply be something that children should endure. It should be somewhere that they can grow and move forward with confidence. That's definitely the one takeaway. There's many, but that's the one.
Shara, it's been great listening to you talk about this and explore what this is all about. I think it's something that is incredibly well thought through from the conversation that we've had tonight and the other things that I've seen and heard about Ohana. I think there's a lot of thought that's gone into this. So, and without sort of, I think it's important within that online learning space that there's so much out there that I think it's really refreshing to hear you talk about this from a perspective that maybe some people wouldn't associate maybe with online education, thinking about the different nuts and bolts of it and how it actually works. So I think that's amazing. Just to emphasize what Tim said, big thanks to everyone who's tuned in. We had 100 viewers and listeners so far. Obviously there'll be more, I'm sure, of you who'll want to catch up on this. If you're just joining now, of course, then hit the replay now. Start your conversation with us now. But what I would like to add is, if you are interested in what we've been talking about, finding out a little bit more about Sharu and a little bit more about Ohana, then obviously I'd encourage you to head over to weareohana.co.uk. That's weareohana.co.uk. And check it out, whether you're a parent, a teacher, or just somebody else who's interested in this realm of a relational online school, which I think is incredibly interesting in itself, really. It's not something I'd heard of sort of before talking to you, Sharu, in that sense. So I think it is quite unique and it's very, very interesting. So if you're interested in finding out more, head over there. That'd be brilliant. And from us, Sharu, is there anything else you want to add into this conversation that we haven't said that you are thinking, I would have loved to have said that in the last hour?
Well, I can talk about Ohana for days, but obviously I'm not going to. What I'd really like to thank you, Tom and Tim. Thank you for giving us, time on your platform to be able to come and talk about a really, really important subject. And thank you to all the listeners who've joined as well. And here's to the first of many, many more conversations about how we can actually contribute collectively towards changing and evolving education.
Brilliant. Thank you very much to my co-host Tim as well. We'll be back on TTR with more shows as per tomorrow. So make sure you tune into the channel, whether it's on YouTube or whatever. If you've enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to click the like and subscribe button and perhaps give it a share within your network if you think there's something interesting in there for other people to get stuck into. Thanks very much, everybody. And we will see you very soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Outstanding, a world-class vision, world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.